What would you do if the person you trusted most revealed a secret that shattered your world? James stood in his dimly lit study, the weight of a single letter in his hand heavier than any burden he'd ever carried. At 52, he thought he'd seen it all: grief, love, betrayal, but nothing prepared him for this. The words on the page blurred as his eyes traced them again. His wife of 10 years, Laura, the woman he'd called his second chance at love, was demanding half of the inheritance his father had left him. A fortune meant for his children, his future, his legacy, and worse, been hiding her own wealth from him for years. James had met Laura when his heart was still raw from his first wife's passing. She was charming, poised, with a smile that could light up a room and a warmth that made his lonely nights bearable. She was a widow herself, or so she said, with a modest job as an art curator and a quiet life that seemed to fit perfectly with his own. He'd been a widower, raising 2 teenagers alone, when Laura stepped into his life like a soft breeze after a storm. They married quickly, blending their lives with an ease that felt like fate. But now, as he stood clutching that letter, he wondered if he'd ever truly known her. The inheritance wasn't a secret. When his father passed, leaving James a sizable estate, land, stocks, and savings from a lifetime of hard work, been open with Laura. They'd sat at the kitchen table, planning how to secure their future, how to support his kids, Emma and Liam, through college and beyond. Laura had nodded, her eyes soft with understanding, promising to stand by him. But she'd never mentioned her own finances. Not once. James assumed she had little to her name, given her modest lifestyle and the way she leaned on him for shared expenses. He didn't mind. He loved providing for her, loved the life they were building together. The truth came crashing down when the letter arrived from her lawyer. Laura wasn't just demanding half of his inheritance, she was claiming she deserved it because she'd sacrificed for their marriage. Sacrificed what? James's mind reeled. The letter hinted at assets she'd concealed, offshore accounts, investments, even property she'd never disclosed. For years, she'd played the part of a devoted, unassuming wife while quietly amassing wealth he knew nothing about. The betrayal cut deeper than the demand itself. How could someone he loved so fiercely keep such secrets? He confronted her that evening. The air in their living room was thick with tension, the kind that makes your chest ache. Laura sat across from him, her face calm, almost defiant. "I was protecting myself, James," she said, her voice steady. "You never asked about my finances. You assumed I had nothing. That's on you." Her words stung, twisting the knife of her deception. Protecting herself? From what? From him? The man who'd given her his heart, his home, his trust? James thought back to the small signs he'd ignored. The late-night phone calls she dismissed as work. The trips she took alone, claiming they were for art exhibitions. The way she'd changed the subject whenever he asked about her past. He'd chalked it up to her independence, her private nature. Now, those moments felt like clues to a life she'd hidden from him. He wondered who she really was. Was her love ever real, or was it all a calculated move? The fight for the inheritance became a battle for truth. James hired a lawyer, digging into Laura's finances. What he uncovered left him breathless. Bank accounts in her name, a condo in another state, investments that dwarfed his own savings. She'd been wealthy all along, far wealthier than he'd ever imagined. Yet she wanted his father's money tied to memories of his childhood, his father's sacrifices, his family's legacy. It wasn't just greed. It was a violation of everything they'd built. As the legal battle loomed, James faced a deeper question. Could he forgive her? His kids urged him to fight, their trust in Laura shattered. Emma, his daughter, cried as she asked why Laura would do this. Liam, his son, was furious, calling her a stranger. But James couldn't let go of the woman he'd loved, the one who'd made him laugh, who'd held him through sleepless nights. Was there still good in her, buried beneath the lies? One night, he found Laura's old journal tucked away in a drawer. Its pages revealed her fear of losing control, of being vulnerable, of a past where she'd been burned by trust. She'd hidden her wealth to protect herself, not from him, but from a world that had once left her with nothing. It didn't excuse her lies, but it gave James a glimpse of her humanity. He didn't know if he could rebuild what they'd lost, but he chose to try, not for the money, but for the love he still believed in. In the end, James offered Laura a choice. Come clean, rebuild trust, or walk away. The inheritance was his father's gift to his children, not hers. But their marriage, their second chance, could still be saved if she chose honesty. As he waited for her answer, James realized that love, like life, was never about what you owned. It was about what you were willing to fight for and what you were brave enough to let go.